I'm Diane Macedo. Thanks for streaming with us. A celebration is set to begin in just a little while from the White House to commemorate Judge Ketanji Brown Jackson's historic Supreme Court confirmation. President Biden and Vice President Harris are set to speak on the South Lawn, as well as Judge Jackson herself. We will bring you the White House event live when it happens. And this comes one day after the Senate voted 53-47 to confirm Jackson. She and President Biden watched the confirmation proceedings from the White House and embraced when that final vote was tallied. We will have more on this historic confirmation in a moment. But first, Russia is accused of launching a new devastating attack on civilians, targeting a train station that served as an evacuation point in southeastern Ukraine. We want to warn you, some of these images are difficult to watch. Ukrainian officials say 2 rockets hit the station this morning, killing at least 50 people and injuring 100 more. They say 4,000 evacuees were at that train station at the time, trying to escape the fighting. Video posted to social media yesterday shows people packed outside the station. You can see just how busy it was before the attack. It comes as Ukraine's government braces for a major Russian offensive in the southeastern part of the country. Foreign correspondent James Longman has the latest from Kyiv.
The Kramatorsk train station in Donetsk hit. Civilians have been crowding the station every day after they were warned to evacuate before Russia's renewed offensive in eastern Ukraine. The attack left at least 39 dead and 87 wounded. Speaking before NATO, Ukraine's foreign minister has warned that the battle for the region will be devastating.
The battle for Donbass will remind you of Second World War, with large operations, maneuvers, involvement of thousands of tanks, armored vehicles, planes, artillery.
President Zelensky calling for even bolder sanctions and additional military help, saying Ukraine needs weapons that will allow us to win on the battlefield, and this will be the strongest sanction against Russia of all possible ones. They want to stop a repeat of this. The northern town of Borodyanka reduced to rubble by Russian planes. Recovery teams finding bodies under flattened homes on a near-daily basis. Ukrainian President Zelensky warning the findings here could be worse than the atrocities already uncovered in Bucha. We saw for ourselves the horror in that town. Bodan took us inside this apartment building, which he says was struck by the Russians. He shows us his friend, incinerated by the blaze it caused. He tells us, I want the whole world to know the truth about what's happening here, he says. I only blame the Russian military for this. Maria cries in the kitchen of her Bucha home, remembering her son Dima, shot dead, she says, by Russian forces. He would run up and down, helping people down in the basement, she says.
I can tell that she's very proud of him.
How can I not be proud of my son when he was such a great person? Russia has been voted off the United Nations Human Rights Council, and now the European Union has approved a 5th round of sanctions, freezing the assets of several Russian banks, banning coal imports, and banning access to EU ports for ships flying the Russian flag. A major admission from Russia.
We have significant losses of troops, and it's a huge tragedy for us.
The true number of Russian losses is difficult to know, but the US estimates more than 10,000 have been killed. And Russian attacks elsewhere continue. In Kharkiv, black plumes of smoke in the sky after another Russian missile attack strikes a bread factory.
Ukraine has done an extraordinary job of defending itself so far with Western help. But the fight in the east will be very different. Russia already occupies large parts of that region. They'll be better able to supply and to support their troops. And that is why Ukraine is asking for more help now. Diane?
All right, James, thank you. And today the White House is celebrating the historic confirmation of Judge Ketanji Brown Jackson. The Senate approved Judge Jackson in a 53-47 vote yesterday, clearing the way for her to become the first black woman to ever serve on the Supreme Court. ABC News senior Washington reporter Devin Dwyer joins me now for more on this. Devin, President Biden and Vice President Harris are expected to speak today. What can we expect to hear from them?
Diane, this is very much a political victory lap for this White House. And officials I've talked to say this is going to be effectively checking the box on 2 major Biden promises. First, a promise that we all have talked about on the campaign trail, that he would nominate the first black woman justice, but also as president that he would pick someone who is in the mold of Justice Stephen Breyer, a well-respected liberal jurist who has been on the court for a quarter century, someone who is a pragmatist, who's a moderate, and certainly Ketanji Brown Jackson checks that box. So today's very much about marking those moments, Diane.
And Devin, Jackson will also be the first federal public defender and the first Florida-raised judge on the Supreme Court. How might that have an impact on some of the high-profile cases the court will hear in her first session?
Well, there's no question that this is a conservative Supreme Court. It is solidly conservative, 6 justices there. Her addition certainly won't change that ideological makeup, but she's going to be there for a long time. Keep in mind, Ketanji Brown Jackson, just 51 years old, the second youngest justice. She could be on the court for 30-plus years. And so when a new justice ascends to the bench, they take the long game. She will obviously take some time to adjust, to get her legs, but she could see several shifts in the balance of power over her lifetime on the bench. And so it's very early to predict and project just how she will leave her mark, how she will change the court's jurisprudence over that time. But suffice it to say, her friends and colleagues I've spoken to, Diane, say she is very much a consensus builder. She's disarming, she's collegial, and she has vowed to take that personality trait really behind the curtain at the court to try to engage her soon-to-be new colleagues.
And Devin, when you think about the history of this moment, we're about to see the first female and first black vice president speak to celebrate the confirmation of the first female black Supreme Court justice. What do you think about that moment, both in terms of the history and the politics?
It's remarkable, Diane. I mean, and I think, you know, at a certain point, you know, we just can't say it enough. I mean, and not only remarkable because of the fact of her race and gender in a judiciary across the board, not just at the Supreme Court, that is overwhelmingly white and male. For her to be at this moment, for the country to be at this moment is something, but she also brings so much groundbreaking, diverse experience and background to the bench, which I consider also significant. You mentioned them earlier, the first Florida-raised judge on there, grew up in Miami, the daughter of public school teachers, so that she'll bring that experience to the table. The first federal public defender, that's significant. She has actually had firsthand experience representing everyday Americans in the judicial system who can't afford an attorney. A critical part of our constitutional process. She has seen that and lived that firsthand. She's also a trial judge. Many of the current justices were former government prosecutors. She will bring that experience, very fact-based experience as a trial judge to the bench as well. So all of those dimensions of her resume and her, her portfolio, I think will truly enhance the Supreme Court, aside from ideology and politics, Diane.
And Devin, most Republican senators left the hall after the vote as Democrats celebrated the confirmation. What are you hearing about that moment?
You know, a lot of people I've talked to, Diane, are simply shaking their heads at what they saw yesterday in that Senate chamber. Not so much pointing the finger at Republicans, but just the fact that these theatrics by both sides of the aisle, both political parties in these confirmation battles have become so commonplace now. It's really, I think, a testament to how low things have gotten in these battles just in the past, decade, 2 decades or so. To see Mitt Romney, the only Republican, stay in the chamber, continue to applaud, really says a lot about his party right now. Of course, only 3 Republicans supporting Ketanji Brown Jackson, but it was certainly a remarkable moment at a time when both parties say they want the court to look more like the country, and this moment certainly reflects that.
And Devin, we keep hearing about new positive COVID-19 cases in Washington. Speaker Pelosi is just one of several federal lawmakers. So will that affect the events planned for today?
You know, Diane, I was just thinking back to the last White House Supreme Court event that became a super spreader. Amy Coney Barrett, you remember that in the Rose Garden with President Trump? It actually ended up rocking the White House, all the participants there. This is certainly a different moment, different point in the pandemic, but here we are again, official Washington rocked by a number of cases. Cabinet officials, White House officials, press secretaries have come down with COVID. This event this afternoon will be held outside. It will be on the South Lawn. It's beautiful. But I think we can expect to see a few more masks in that crowd, Diane, and also one of the 3 Republicans who voted for Ketanji Brown Jackson will not be there. Susan Collins, she came down with COVID-19. Diane.
All right, Devin Dwyer, thank you.
Thanks,
Coming up, the latest details on the Secret Service scandal sparking national security concerns. What authorities say was found in the home of the 2 men accused of impersonating federal agents when we come back. Welcome back. 2 men accused of impersonating federal agents and giving gifts to Secret Service agents are due back in court today after prosecutors described finding a stash of weapons in their possession. The men said they had no money for a lawyer, so investigators are trying to figure out where their funding came from and what they may have been planning. Chief Global Affairs correspondent Martha Raddatz has the latest.
Stunning new allegations about the two men accused of brazenly impersonating Homeland Security agents and duping members of the Secret Service. Allegations now sparking national security concerns. The men in court yesterday. Federal prosecutors saying that over the course of 2 years, Haider Ali, along with his accomplice Aryan Taherzadeh, provided Secret Service agents with lavish gifts, free apartments totaling $40,000, iPhones, a flat-screen TV, surveillance systems, and that Taherzadeh offered to buy a $2,000 assault rifle for a member of the First Lady's protective detail. The government saying one of the men claimed to have a connection to the ISI, which is the Pakistani intelligence service, and that agents found visas showing a history of travel to Pakistan and Iran. 4 Secret Service employees are now suspended. The investigation still underway. FBI agents seen gathering evidence at the D.C. apartment building where the defendants allegedly operated. And prosecutors say searches of their homes and cars have already turned up weapons, ammunition, body armor, gas masks, a drone, and a binder with a list of every resident in their D.C. apartment complex. Neighbors shaken.
It's scary, it's our place of living. I just came home and then they're just FBI agents. I'm like, what's going on?
A detention hearing is scheduled for today to determine whether the men should remain locked up. But with all those unanswered questions, prosecutors would very much like to see the men stay behind bars. Diane?
All right, Martha Raddatz, thank you. And let's bring in ABC News contributor Donald Mihalik, a former senior special agent for the U.S. Secret Service, for more on this. Donald, 4 Secret Service agents have been suspended for allegedly accepting thousands of dollars worth of gifts, in some cases free apartments. So how concerning is that?
The whole situation is very concerning because these 2 suspects, we don't know where the money came from. We don't know where they got the resources, where they got the identifications. There's a lot of unanswered questions here. So the whole situation is very concerning.
Now, Secret Service agents are some of the most elite and experienced law enforcement officers in the country. So how surprised are you to hear these allegations that they were fooled by these alleged imposters?
So there's an inherent trust within the law enforcement community. When you meet other law enforcement officers, there's that inherent trust of you accept people for who they say they are, especially if they're showing you that they have the gear, the resources, and the identifications. That they're a law enforcement officer. Typically, agents and police officers don't ask each other to see identification. Having said that, though, looking at these 2 suspects, what they had, where they got it from, where the resources came from, the whole situation is extremely perplexing.
And what do we know at this point about how this was finally uncovered?
According to the criminal complaint, there was a postal inspector that had an investigation that brought him to that building, and that culminated in the discovery that these 2 individuals were impersonating HSI agents. And then the investigation carried on from there to show that they then were interacting with Secret Service agents that were living in the building. I should say 3 Secret Service agents and an HSI personnel.
So where does the investigation stand now? Where do they go from here?
Well, if you read the complaint identifies the Secret Service agents and the HSI official as witnesses. So my guess is they're cooperating with the investigation, and they're probably also perplexed about how this all happened. The FBI is, of course, going to dive into this and figure out, was this counterintelligence? Was this criminal? Or was this just 2 people that took advantage of a situation? And I know that the Secret Service and the DHS Inspector General are going to dive into this investigation to figure out what happened and if there was any issues and close those gaps that they identify.
All right, Donald Mihalik, we appreciate your time today. Thank you.
Thank you.
Coming up, Nancy Pelosi is among more than a dozen lawmakers who have now tested positive for COVID-19. The latest on the COVID outbreak in the Capitol when we come back. Welcome back to ABC News Live. Congressman Raja Krishnamurthy is the latest federal lawmaker to test positive for COVID-19 this week. He joins more than a dozen others as concerns of an outbreak in the nation's capital grow. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi is in quarantine after she tested positive as well. We're told she is not experiencing symptoms. President Biden and Pelosi were seen side by side at two separate events earlier this week. The White House says the president tested negative on Wednesday night and is not considered a close contact based on the latest CDC guidelines. Authorities in Israel say they've killed the gunman who killed 2 people and wounded 10 others on a busy street in Tel Aviv on Thursday. The Israeli prime minister called it a terrorist attack. At least 11 people have been killed over the past 2 weeks in a string of attacks in Israel. ISIS has claimed responsibility for most of those attacks, but those claims have not been confirmed. An investigation is underway after a DHL cargo plane skidded off the runway and split into 2 pieces yesterday in Costa Rica. The aircraft was reportedly headed to Guatemala when the pilot requested an emergency landing shortly after takeoff. Officials say no one was injured. And inflation is hitting the wine industry. Prices are going up again due to an increase in the price of glass bottles. Some winemakers say they're paying as much as 20% more. Their best advice? Check around for sales. And scientists are now learning more about how COVID is affecting people long term. Hundreds of thousands of Americans are so-called COVID long haulers, some now battling crippling COVID symptoms for more than 2 years. Ika Jachi has an inside look at a state-of-the-art clinic helping long haulers rehabilitate.
The sights and sounds of New York City couldn't be brighter or louder than the scenes you'll see on Broadway. Just take Joel Fram's word for it.
Conducting is such an amazing experience.
Company, lots of company, life is company. For almost 30 years, on any given night, there's a good chance you'll find him leading a full orchestra for some of the biggest plays on Broadway.
I've worked on Cats, I've worked on Wicked, I'm currently conducting Company.
What is wrong?
You have to almost be psychically connected to everything around you, to the performances that are going on stage, to how people are doing their songs.
Not a lot of people realize how much work actually goes into conducting. What's a typical day for you?
You get to the point where it reaches the stage, and then you get really long hours. Someone is asking you to create, problem solve, make art for 12 straight hours. And in a way, it's exhausting, but also in a way, it's incredibly rewarding.
Joel was living his dream, but like so many other stories across the country, it was interrupted. What happened March 2020?
On a Wednesday, I remember at dinner feeling kind of chilled, thinking, is it cold in here? On the Thursday, I woke up and I had such a high fever and felt so sick.
Broadway was shut down, and so was Joel, putting his return to the orchestra pit in jeopardy. He tested positive for COVID-19 and was experiencing severe symptoms. But after a few weeks, Joel recovered. Back to normal.
Back to as normal as it could be, knowing that we were locked down and that there was no job to go to.
Just 1 month later, after feeling fine, his symptoms returned in the most unimaginable way.
Not only did I have fatigue, but I had terrible joint pain, which for a conductor is and a pianist is a very terrifying thing. I started to get ocular migraines, so I would have this ring of pain around my left eye that would just be really debilitating.
And how long do those symptoms last?
Well, I'm still not completely clear of them.
Joel was experiencing the beginning of his battle with long COVID, what's now known as post-acute COVID-19 syndrome, clinical symptoms that occur 4 weeks after initial COVID symptoms. While the numbers have varied, studies indicate that up to 30% of COVID-19 patients experience symptoms up to 9 months after recovering.
Heart rate looks good, oxygen looks good.
New York City's Mount Sinai Hospital has transformed part of its research center into the Center for Post-COVID Care. It's now been open for nearly 2 years. Dr. Jenna Tosto-Mancuso has been working with Joel since the onset of his symptoms.
We are at 6 minutes, so let's take a minute here and work on your breathing. And you can slow your legs if it's going past that 2 out of 10 on the exertion scale.
And like at Mount Sinai, health experts from around the globe continue to uncover more about this disease.
This is still a really, really mysterious condition. It really does affect every single organ system.
Dr. Susan Cheng is one of the leading researchers studying post-COVID and says you can experience a range of symptoms. Right now, experts have linked more than 200 different symptoms to the condition.
For some people, it is mainly pulmonary or chest pain. In other patients, it's very much neurological or neurocognitive. And in other patients, it's more GI.
Dr. Cheng says doctors are still studying post-acute COVID-19 syndrome, with little-known options for treatment often affecting patients' daily lives.
In the patients that have enrolled into some of our studies, we'd say probably up to half have been able to return to work. A quarter have been able to return to only part-time work, and a quarter haven't been able to return to any work. And that's months and months later.
Where are we exertion-wise?
So I feel like this is about a 3.
Okay.
And the painstaking work goes on at Mount Sinai with thousands of post-COVID patients like Joel, now 2 years into this pandemic and trying to get their lives back to normal again. It's both a mental and physical process.
It's like you're teaching his heart how to work again, right?
Teaching his body how to work again, which is really the most unique process. But what we've really come to realize is that a patient-centered approach that progressively introduces activity back into day-to-day life, that really targets energy conservation strategies with the goal of slowly but surely rebuilding, I think that in and of itself is the bread and butter of our rehab program.
At the beginning, I was insane. I thought, this isn't working. But I just focused on breathing and lowering my heart rate.
Dr. Tosto Mancuso says the best way to treat post-COVID is gradually increasing a patient's tolerance for exercise, all while mindful of the possibility that symptoms could return and flare up. For Joel, what started as simple exercises lying down eventually led to minutes on the stationary bike.
There is still more to go. You know, I am still, for instance, at the gym at the 8-minute, 2-minute, 8-minute stage. But eventually, I want to be at the 25-minute stage where you work out in a way that is expected of most people and not flare my symptoms.
It took months, but it worked. When Broadway opened back up later that fall, Joel was right in the center of it, doing what he loved.
I did go back to work in October, and I did work 8-hour rehearsal days, and then 12-hour rehearsal days, and then 16-hour rehearsal days. And I happily had the support of my music team, who, if ever I needed to take a moment, could take over for me. But I found that I was able to do my job as long as I managed my energy window.
Our thanks to Ike Ejachi for that report. I'm Diane Macedo. Do stay with us as ABC News Live continues with news, context, and analysis.
Hi, everyone. George Stephanopoulos here. Thanks for checking out the ABC News YouTube channel. If you'd like to get more videos, show highlights, and watch live event coverage, click on the right over here to subscribe to our channel. And don't forget to download the ABC News app for breaking news alerts. Thanks for watching.